The frozen signal. The wind over Antarctica was unlike anywhere else on Earth, endless, merciless, and hollow, as if the continent itself were sighing in grief. In the winter of 2031, at Polaris Research Station, the blizzard outside had raged for 6 days without pause. White shadows pressed against the glass like restless spirits, and the temperature sank to -70. Inside the control room, a young researcher leaned closer to her monitor. "Dr. Sterling. You might want to hear this," she whispered. Dr. Alara Sterling, oceanographer and acoustic specialist, pushed her glasses up and approached. The sound file, looping on the screen, was faint at first, a low vibration, like the groan of shifting glaciers. But then, there was a pattern, a rise, a fall, and, unmistakably, harmony. It wasn't the cry of whales, it wasn't tectonic movement, it was music. The rest of the research team gathered, drawn by the eerie cadence. Dozens of voices, layered, resonant, yet strangely mechanical, seemed to weave a melody no one could quite place. It resembled the structure of an ancient hymn, repeating in perfect cycles every 12 hours. "What the hell is that?" one of the geologists muttered. "Seismic interference," another guessed, but Alara shook her head, her face pale in the glow of the monitors. "No, this isn't interference. It's deliberate. Someone, or something, is singing beneath the ice." They traced the origin. Deep under the Weddell Sea shelf, 3,000 meters below solid ice. An impossible depth. At first, some laughed nervously, dismissing it as a quirk of the equipment. But as the nights passed, the recordings grew louder, clearer, almost intimate. On the 5th night, one of the engineers stormed into the lab, his face drained of blood. "I heard it without the speakers," he stammered. He pressed his palms against his ears. They were singing my name. Ilara should have dismissed it, should have told the crewman he was imagining things after weeks of confinement in the frozen desert. But when she replayed the last signal through the system and slowed it down, she heard it too. Between the layered chords, buried in the harmony like a whisper through teeth, was her own name. Ilara. Her chest tightened. Rationality demanded she walk away. But something in that voice, gentle, mournful, yet commanding, made her tremble with a longing she could not explain. By the end of the week, she convened a private meeting. "I want authorization for descent," she said. The others erupted in protest. "Through 3 kilometers of ice? That's insane." But Ilara's eyes shone with feverish determination. "This isn't just a signal, it's an invitation." For a long moment, the storm howled outside, rattling the metal walls of the station. Then silence. One by one, the team's resistance softened. The music had been in all their dreams. They had all felt its pull. And so, despite the danger, they began preparations. A drilling shaft would open a path through the ancient ice, and a single submersible would descend into the abyss. On the night before launch, Ilara stood alone outside, her breath crystallizing instantly in the polar air. The auroras danced above her, green flames across a black sky. The song drifted through the gale again, distant yet clear, a chorus rising from below the world. Her lips moved without thought. She was humming along, and in that moment, Ilara Sterling no longer wondered what was singing beneath the ice. She wondered what it would be like to join them. The descent beneath ice. The drilling began at dawn. Steel teeth bit into ancient ice that had lain untouched for millions of years. The ground trembled with each strike, the sound echoing through the empty halls of Polaris Station like the beating of a colossal heart. For 40 hours straight, the crew worked in shifts, hollowing out a shaft 3 kilometers deep. The ice wasn't normal. At certain layers, the drills slowed, grinding against something that resonated like glass. Each time, the recordings of the choir grew clearer, as though the singers sensed their approach. When at last the submersible, Nereus II, was lowered into the shaft, the team stood silently around the launch bay. Their breath misted in the frigid air, But it wasn't the cold that made them tremble. It was anticipation and fear. Inside the craft, Alara adjusted her headset, her pulse thundering in her ears. Around her, 3 colleagues fastened themselves in. Malik, the geologist with steady hands. Vera, the engineer whose skepticism had slowly crumbled into obsession. And Jensen, the sonar operator, already pale and hollow-eyed, as if he had been listening to the voices too long. The hatch sealed. A mechanical groan echoed overhead, and the submersible began its descent. At first, only the grinding of cables and the hum of machinery filled the silence. But 100 meters down, the first notes seeped through. Low, resonant, like a breath through a cathedral organ. Jensen froze, eyes wide. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. Vera nodded stiffly. Malik said nothing, his jaw clenched. Alara leaned forward. She knew this was no longer the recordings. The choir was singing directly into the hull. As they sank deeper, the voices multiplied, weaving into complex harmonies. The pressure gauge ticked upward, warning lights flashing occasionally as if even the steel vessel shuddered beneath the weight of the ice. Then something stranger happened. The melody began shaping itself into words. Not in English, nor any human tongue, but each syllable carried intent, summoning, promising. Alara's eyes glazed over. She could almost understand. Her headset crackled. A faint whisper slithered through. Alara. Her name again, clearer than ever. She pressed her palms against her ears, but it was inside her skull now, vibrating through her bones. The others shifted uncomfortably. Malik muttered that he felt nauseous. Vera clutched her head. Jensen's lips moved as if mouthing along to the hymn. At 2,700 meters, the floodlights illuminated something impossible. The walls of the shaft opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling glittering with frozen spires that stretched like the vaulted arches of some buried cathedral. The choir swelled. Light shimmered across the cavern floor, revealing structures half buried in ice, pillars, buttresses, and what looked like rows of benches carved from black stone. "Is this a temple?" Malik breathed. No one answered. All 4 stared at the colossal shape ahead. A door, encased in solid ice, towering higher than the submersible itself. The ice wasn't natural. It pulsed faintly, as though lit from within. The song shifted. Slower now, more deliberate. A chant. Alara's eyes filled with tears she couldn't explain. She pressed her hand to the glass, whispering, "They're waiting for us." Behind her, Jensen whispered in unison with the choir, his voice hollow, mechanical. "Open the door." The words sent a chill through the cabin, and though no one moved, the ice on that great black gate began to crack. The choir awakens. The first fracture spread like lightning across the black gate. The submersible's floodlights caught shards of ice drifting upward in the freezing currents, sparkling like broken glass in the dark. Jensen pressed both hands against the viewport, his lips moving in silent prayer or imitation. His voice mingled with the hum of the choir, growing louder, as though he were no longer Jensen at all. "Alara, they are calling." Alara's breath caught. She felt the same pull, like invisible threads coiling around her mind, tugging her closer to the gate. She wanted, no, needed, to know what waited beyond it. Then the door opened, not with the grinding of stone, not with an explosion. It simply parted, the ice dissolving like mist, revealing a void that swallowed the beams of their floodlights. From that abyss emerged shapes. At first they looked like shadows, vast and fluid, gliding silently through the black water. But as they drew nearer, the crew saw faces, or what might once have been faces. Hollow sockets, wide mouths stretched in eternal song, bodies elongated into twisted forms that seemed half human, half something older. The singing was no longer distant. It was inside the cabin, vibrating through steel, flesh and bone. Malik screamed, clutching his ears as blood streamed between his fingers. Vera staggered back, her eyes rolling white as the melody overtook her. Jensen's voice rose above them all, chanting with perfect pitch, every note aligned with the creatures outside. He turned toward the others, his expression vacant, serene. They were never trapped. They were waiting. One of the entities pressed against the viewport. Its face, or the suggestion of one, was inches from Ilara's. The glass groaned as if about to shatter. Its mouth opened wider, wider, until it was nothing but a black abyss. And then Ilara heard it. Not words, but meaning, pouring into her mind like ice water. Join the choir. Become endless. Her vision blurred. She saw herself beneath the ice, her body drifting among them, her mouth open in eternal song. The thought was both terrifying and beautiful. "Don't listen," Malik roared, shaking her shoulder. His own nose was bleeding, his eyes bloodshot, but he fought the sound with sheer will. "They want us dead." The floodlights flickered. For a heartbeat, the cavern was plunged into darkness. Only the luminous eyes of the creatures glowed through the void. Then the lights returned, and something worse appeared. The benches carved in black stone were no longer empty. Rows upon rows of frozen figures sat upright, their skin pale as marble, mouths agape in silent chorus. Some were dressed in modern garb, others in uniforms from centuries past. A few still wore shackles of rusted iron. All of them stared forward, unblinking. The silent choir was not a myth. It was a congregation, and they were adding to it. The gate behind them began to close, sealing the submersible inside the abyssal cathedral. The last hymn. The gate sealed with a thunderous resonance, a single, final chord that rattled the submersible as though struck by an invisible hand. They were trapped. Malik hammered at the controls, trying desperately to reverse the descent thrusters, but the systems flickered, scrambled by waves of sound that invaded even the electronics. Warning lights flashed red, each alarm drowned beneath the growing hymn. Vera slumped in her seat, her eyes wide but unseeing. She was mouthing the words now, in perfect synchrony with Jensen, her voice blending with his. Their duet echoed the larger chorus outside, a call and response of the damned. "Ilara," Jensen intoned, his face eerily serene. "The song is not death, it is deliverance. Sing with us." Ilara's grip tightened on her headset. Her thoughts blurred under the crushing weight of the melody. Every instinct screamed at her to resist, yet the pull was intoxicating. She could see it now. Visions of endless choirs beneath oceans and ice, their voices weaving through the very fabric of the earth. No pain, no loneliness, only unity, only song. But Malik's shout snapped her back. "Look at them, Ilara, look!" Through the viewport, the rows of frozen congregants began to stir. Mouths opened wider. Chests rose and fell as though taking in breath for the first time in centuries. The choir outside swelled louder, urging them awake, and, one by one, the petrified figures joined in. A wall of voices, layered upon voices, until the water itself vibrated like a struck bell. The cavern trembled. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling of ice above, sending cascades of shards into the abyss. Ilara felt her sanity teetering. The pressure of the hymn was unbearable, pressing against her ribs, her skull, her very soul. She knew if she listened any longer, she would lose herself entirely. Malik tried to stand, reaching for the emergency ballast release. "We have to get out." He never finished. A sudden shudder shook the vessel as one of the entities phased halfway through the hull. Its formless hand, black, liquid, endless, pierced Malik's chest. He convulsed once, then fell silent, his eyes glassy as the hymn claimed him. Ilara screamed, but no sound left her throat. The song devoured it. The creature retreated, and Malik's body stirred. Slowly, with agonizing grace, he stood again. His mouth opened. From it poured not his own voice but the same ancient hymn. He had joined the choir. The ceiling above gave way, splitting open with a roar that shook the abyss. Water rushed in, crushing, cold, merciless. The submersible groaned under the pressure. Alara clutched the console, her heart hammering. Her last thought before the lights went out was not of escape, it was of surrender. As the final hymn consumed her, the world above shifted. At Polaris Station, far above the ice, the research team monitoring the transmission froze in horror as the sonar feed transformed into a deafening symphony. Not just random noise, this was structured, harmonic, perfect. The voices had grown too strong to contain beneath the ice. They were broadcasting outward, bleeding into the open world. Radios across Antarctica flickered with static that melted into song. Satellites caught the frequencies and bounced them across continents. Soon, the silent choir would not just be heard beneath the ice. It would be heard everywhere. And once you heard it, you would never be free. The choir has begun, and the world will listen. If you were captivated by this journey into the abyss, don't look away now. Subscribe to Terra Uncharted, where we dive into the deepest mysteries, the darkest legends, and the hidden horrors our world still conceals. Because the ocean is vast, and not everything that sings, sings for us.